Welcome to the Character Sheet, comic book's official home for all things tabletop and fantasy. I am Christian Hoffer, one of the hosts of this fine show. Today, I am joined by not one, but two pretty awesome people. First and foremost, welcoming to the show for the very first time, Hanmah Atkins, my partner in crime and tabletop over on Comic Book, making her Character Sheet debut. So welcome, Hanmah. That is a face that you'll be seeing a lot more of on this channel in the coming weeks and months. Also, today I am joined by one of the big names in the tabletop RPG space. I am joined by the one, the only, Cody Pondsmith. Hello, Cody. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm not sure about one of the big names in the tabletop industry, but I'll take it.
I consider you to be one of the big names, and that's what's really important. I don't know. We've been a big fan of your work for, going back years. For those of you who don't know Cody's work, he is one of the primary designers over at our Talsorian games. So he's worked on the Witcher RPG. He's worked on the Cyberpunk RPG. And now we're here to talk about his newest project, Shadowscar. So what is Shadowscar?
So Shadowscar is my first fully independently created RPG. It is I like to call it a game of intrigue and espionage across a multiverse of worlds. So you play agents of a secret agency called the Shadowscar Agency, who are trained in ninjutsu techniques and sent out into a multiverse of worlds to hunt down monsters and ghosts and spirits from Japanese mythology and keep them from causing chaos across the multiverse.
Okay. What obviously I can think of a few inspirations that this drew from. And we'll talk about that in a second. But first and foremost, what type of game system does it use? Because I believe it's a new one.
Yeah, so Shadowstar uses what we're calling the mosiac system. It is a D6 dice pool system where you take a number of dice, effectively equivalent to your statistic and your skill values, and roll those. Anything that gets above a 3 is a success. Any 6s are 2 successes, and you're aiming to meet a difficulty value. The system is designed to run fast, be very fluid, and kind of in the moment. It is kept fairly low complexity just to make sure that it's really both easy to run and sort of less intimidating for new players. It is definitely a new system. It has been drawn from all of my experience with role-playing games over the years, taking little bits of things from different systems here and there that have inspired me and that I've had fun running with my players in my home games.
As players jump in to experience the mosiac system, what kind of stories and experiences are you hoping that they craft?
So I've always said that that Shadowscar is kind of like a secret agent film crossed with a shonen anime. So I am expecting or hoping, the system was designed for these, sort of like the high stakes spy thriller type interactions, sneaking into enemy bases, going undercover, trying to assassinate dangerous villains before they can pull off their terrible plans. It is definitely a highly stealth-focused game with a number of mechanics built around you being stealth agents rather than specifically like warriors, as it were. One of the key mechanics that we bring forward for the system itself is our assassination mechanic. So because Shadowscar is a stealth game and almost more of a puzzle game than a combat game, we have the assassinate mechanic, which is if you are completely undetected by an enemy, you can roll a stealth check against their awareness skill base. So how many dice they roll for their awareness. And if you succeed, then you kill them outright. no damage to hit points, no large combat. It is just death. If they are of a higher threat rating, you may have to run and roll against their defense. But for low-level thugs and guards and things like that, it is the equivalent of like a cutscene kill like you might see in Tenchu games or Assassin's Creed, stuff like that. This is done to keep the game in that stealth and puzzle solving kind of milieu. So it is less focused on going into all-out combat and more focused on how can I get around all of these threats to succeed in my mission, using the assassination mechanic to deal with, the low-level threats that you might have to fight if you were to go directly in a much cleaner way than if you had to just go in guns blazing.
So I have a quick question about the totally undetected part of the assassination mechanic, because I've run a lot of high fantasy tabletop RPGs, and the rogue always tries to claim, no matter what they're doing, that they're totally undetected. So what does that mean in this game? How does one determine that that they are going undetected? Is there a perception mechanic that they have to meet, or is it a stealth, or how do you determine that?
So being undetected is the result of you being within possible sight of your opponent, but having made a successful stealth check versus their awareness check. It is kept very simple, just so that we don't have a whole lot of crazy ups and downs and sub rules and things like that. But it's made a little more complicated because there are a number of special senses that enemies can have, like keen smell and keen hearing, night vision, things like that, that you will have to kind of counter to be undetected by the threat. But is basically an opposed stealth roll versus their awareness roll to be undetected. And the assumption is that you are effectively making this roll anytime that you are in their direct area attempting to move or take an action or something like that, so that you can remain undetected.
Got it.
I'm glad that you mentioned that Shadowscar's combat is much more puzzle-based than traditional combat, because that was something that I picked up on as I was looking through it. What was the driving factor behind opting to go for that more puzzle-based game versus the traditional combat?
Some of it comes from the initial inspiration. I was inspired by a lot of anime, I was also inspired by games like the Tenchu franchise, which are very much, stealth puzzle games more than they are combat games. They are games where you can instantly kill a target if you sneak up on them, but if you go into direct combat, it is much more dangerous. It is much harder to actually successfully come out of that on top. But because I wanted this more stealth-focused game, it kind of lent itself to being more of a puzzle game, because combat is loud, combat takes a long time. So, actively going into combat in a game like that is kind of your last resort, effectively. You should theoretically be going under the radar, using your tools and magic and techniques to get by threats and get past obstacles, rather than, going in guns blazing and just attacking. And like I said, a lot of the inspiration for that comes from the fact that I wanted this to be a stealth assassin game more than, because drawing from anime, there's a lot of shonen anime that is, even if it's, ninja based, is a lot of big flashy fights and destroying mountains with magical attacks and stuff like that. But I wanted to keep it to a little bit more of a grounded stealth focused game.
So I want to circle back to the creation of this game, because I know you've been working on it for quite some time now. How old were you when you first started conceptualizing Shadowscar?
So I was 11 when I first started working or thinking about Shadowscar, let's say. But it has not always been the game that we're going to see, coming out soon. I say I was heavily influenced by a lot of anime, especially Naruto, because way back when I was 11, like hanging out with one of my friends at a sleepover playing Naruto Ultimate Ninja 1. That's where Shadowscar started, but it started as a Naruto role-playing game because we were both role players, and we had just kind of recently been introduced to the hobby, and we really like Naruto and we really like role-playing. So we thought like, hey, what if we made a Naruto role-playing game? And we started out on that, and then kind of quickly after we started, because we were 11 and never made a role-playing game before, that idea kind of fell by the wayside, and it changed and kind of became its own thing. And over the last, I guess, like 19 years, it has evolved over and over again into different iterations of the same core, ninja anime based concept.
Can we talk about the multiverse aspect of the game really quick? So, that's one of the things I found to be most fascinating about this. So we have a world, like it's not just one world, it's like 5 or 6, and each one is inspired by different genres. Can you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah. So the way the multiverse works is that agents start out in what's kind of referred to as the prime dimension, though it's not actually the center of the multiverse, which is Nakatsukuni, which is this inherently like feudal Japanese, like 17th century Japanese setting, where all of the magic and mythology is all real. The kami, the spirits of nature, are all real and have sway over the world around you. And there's magic like onmyodo and shugendo. There are, or were at one point much more frequently, yokai and yurei and other sort of magical creatures. So that's kind of the core world. But then there are surrounding worlds, which in Shadowscar are referred to as infected worlds, because in the nature of Shadowscar, in the background, there was this massive war that happened in Nakatsukuni between the sort of forces of good, as it were, in this case being the kami and humanity, versus a corrupted kami, Izanami, and the forces of Yomi no Kuni, which is the afterlife. So the afterlife rebelled against the gods and tried to destroy Nakatsukuni. And in the end, the only way to end the war was to banish all of the monsters and corrupted gods and creatures out of Nakatsukuni. But the gods did not realize is that in banishing them, they threw them into multiple other worlds surrounding Nakatsukuni. So the infected worlds we talk about, there are 3 of them. There is Steel Court, which is a effectively 19th century, very heavily focused on Europe and specifically England. This steampunk setting where the Industrial Revolution continued just far enough to create the Stuart steam turbine engine, which it allowed the creation of these massive steam-powered monstrosities, giant sort of automaton-like creatures based on different animals, big fantastical airships, steam trains, all of these fantastical sort of steampunk elements. There is Fifth Street, which is roughly like a late Roaring 20s America setting, where it is basically very heavily set in that like Roaring 20s mentality. There's mobsters, there's Pulp Fiction, but the entire dimension has this strange overlayer of it referred to in the world as the narrative, which effectively manipulates the world itself to create stories. So we like to say that everybody in Fifth Street is part of a film, effectively. all being filmed at the same time in the same world. So different films overlap over each other. They happen in different places. The world around them manipulates itself seemingly to make those stories better or more gripping. The environment around you can change to match the scene. So it's a very, in one way, very chaotic, but very active and interesting dimension to try to manipulate or try to navigate, as it were. And then the last of the infected dimensions is Refuge, which is a like near future setting where the basically United Nations, after this massive nuclear conflict, which happened basically the what's it called? My brain. Basically, the Cuban Missile Crisis goes hot in this dimension, destroying a big chunk of Cuba. And in response to this, the United Nations puts together this project called the Selene Project, which is to make a space colony that would eventually be a fully fledged colony on the moon, with the hope of both bringing all of humanity together and also ensuring that if there's ever a World War III nuclear apocalypse, that some remnants of humanity will still be around. They do all of this expecting nuclear conflict, but in effect, when the dimension is infected, there's a blight that is put on Earth in this dimension, which destroys the global population of Earth, leaving the only remaining living humans on this space colony, building this lunar colony, attempting to effectively rebuild with very little idea what happened to Earth, just knowing that they've stopped getting communications. And when they look down at Earth, it is, this terrible sort of smoke shrouded apocalyptic world that they have very little idea what happened, but they know that they can't go back. So these are the three dimensions that we kind of talk about initially. The mosaic is a lot larger than that, but we realized very, very early on that we wanted to give information on these worlds and really flesh out these worlds. So we kind of had this choice of either doing a reasonably sized book with, 17 dimensions and everyone gets 1 page of description, or we could do an absolutely massive book with 17 dimensions and each one gets, 15 pages, but the book is, this thick and, looks like the Gutenberg Bible. So we decided to compromise and basically do a moderately sized book with 4 dimensions that get all of their own fleshing out, and then leaves room for expanding with new dimensions as the game progresses.
As this is multiversal, and as you mentioned, the mosaic system kind of supports all different types of genres, what other genres do you think would really fit with this mosaic system? What other worlds can you see as a concept in Shadowscar?
So I have like a list of other worlds. I have just like off the top of my head that we have developed for later use, I guess, in Shadowscar. There is a world called Greengrave, which is a post-eco-apocalypse setting where attempts to effectively end world hunger have created these massively overgrown plants that are taking over cities and growing over the landscape. And some people rumor that they may be even growing sentience and creating these plant monsters. There is, as we kind of go out, there are more weird elements, like Greyburrow, which is an Edwardian setting, very much sort of gaslight fantasy. It is this setting with a heavy occult theme. So there are ghosts and creatures, but there are also, exorcists who are going around and, getting rid of specters that are haunting people, and, morticians that have to deal with the possibly rising dead and things like that. There is a setting called White Squall, which is a water world where it is set in like the golden age of piracy. And there are these people on these massive ships sailing across this seemingly never-ending ocean, being attacked by pirates and basically having these massive conflicts across ships that are large enough to be cities of their own. There's a lot of ideas because we kind of want the multiverse of Shadowscar, the mosaic as we call it, to encapsulate as many different experiences as we can. One of the things we talk about in the core rulebook is how to build your own setting in the mosaic, how to take a setting that you know and love, whether that be a pre-established setting from another role-playing game or your own homebrewed fantasy setting, and put it into the confines of Shadowscar as though it were one of the worlds in the mosaic.
What was your favorite aspect of Shadowscar to work on?
My favorite aspect of Shadowscar was actually building the worlds. I spent a kind of ridiculous amount of time between all four of the core settings, researching the history of the different regions, learning all about, the 7 Years' War and the Napoleonic Wars and the various sort of dynastic conflicts in feudal Japan, and learning about the sort of political machinations and conflicts in the 1920s, and building those conflicts into Refuge with the foundation of the Cold War, and what would happen if the Cold War totally boiled over.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I love the multiversal aspect of this, like I said, because it just opens up so many different possibilities to play and experience the game and what you've made. And I think that's really special. I really like this concept as a whole. What's it like seeing this finally come to fruition? As you mentioned, we're getting close to this release window. What's it like? You've been working on this for over a decade to start approaching those more final dates where people will get to start playing this for themselves.
It's, on one hand, it is definitely a little nerve-wracking. I know that I love this setting. And honestly, I've been amazed and flattered, I guess, at how much other people seem to be interested in the setting. But I want to make sure that it's, something that everybody loves and can play and have fun with. But at the same time, there's a big part of me that's just, kind of fascinated and a little bit sort of blown away that something that has kind of been my just in kicking around in the back of my head for, years and years and years is officially going to be a published game that people are going to be able to, buy and run for their friends. I've been personally running this game for years. And it's interesting that, soon I will be able to hear about how other people run it, hear stories from other people's Shadowscar games, which, is really, both sort of a humbling experience, but a fascinating one, because I really want to see how people interact with this thing that has been a, foundational part of my life for such a long time.
If you could go back and give 11-year-old Cody one piece of advice to set him on the right path, making this game for over a decade, what would it be? I know that's really tough.
See, that's it's extremely difficult because, like I said, this game has evolved so much over the years, and it evolved with me as a person. It started out as an actual role-playing game. It evolved into a ninja high school game for a while because, I was 13. I'm
a little sad we didn't get to see that, Cody.
Like spinoff, right? Spinoff?
Yeah, spin-off.
That's a world. That's an entirely separate dimension that I want to see in the future.
So it has evolved so much, it would be hard to pick one thing to say, but I think in perhaps a bit of a corny response, I think just letting myself of many years ago know that it will eventually be a real thing, to know for certain that eventually it will be a published product that people around the world will be able to play and kind of share in that experience.
So we've been spending the last 20 or so minutes like hyping up Shadowscar. Now I really want to play this game. Now we already have a quick start guide that's out now. But when will the full release be?
So we handed out the quick start guide for Free RPG Day, and there are plans to have that available for free on our website shortly-ish. Actually upcoming at GenCon, so end of July, early August, we're releasing the starter set for Shadowscar, Mask of the Green Demon, which I'm personally very excited for. It's got a bunch of intrigue, kind of hunting down the trails to uncover this big cross-dimensional smuggling ring. And we have plans for Core Book. We're currently aiming for a December release of Core Book. Early December, generally around the same time as PAX Unplugged, for those who are familiar with it. But I can't speak to that 100% because we still have a lot to do. That's our plan, but we gotta make sure that this game comes out the way we want it and as good as we want it to be.
Okay, well, fantastic. You heard it there. If you're going to GenCon, you're going to be able to get the starter set here, and soon you'll be able to download the quick start guide and jump into this really cool, really fascinating world. So Shadowscar, it's going to be a big RPG. I think this is going to be awesome. I'm super pumped about it. So we can't wait to can't wait to see more. So looking forward to talking more about Shadowscar here on the channel in the not too distant future. But that's about all the time we have for this today. But Cody, thank you so much for coming on. This has been an absolute blast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And Hannah, obviously, we'll see more of you soon.
I'll be around sooner rather than later, I'm sure.
If you want to, keep on, be sure to follow our Talsorian games over on, the Twitter, assorted other social media. You can follow me at Seahoffer Cbus. Hannah is at the amazing Spider Han over on Twitter, and that spider is missing a letter or two, but you can track her down pretty easily.
It's missing the E. It's very easy.
And there we go. And of course, you can follow the channel at D&D Sheet, and also do the liking and the subscribing and all the other things that you need to do to keep the YouTube algorithm running hot. That's all the time that we have for you today. But until next time.